At the end of his video, Thunderfoot says that it is important to know the difference between fact and fiction. I totally agree with that. But unfortunately, many atheists and people like Thunderfoot do rather poorly in that department when it comes to promoting some of the tales that they tell. If you want to see some real storytelling, just check out some of the atheist writings and so-called science textbooks. For instance, how about those who claim the fine-tuned universe of ours created itself from nothing? In Discovery, April 1st, 2002, in an article called Goethe's Grand Guess, you find this quote: "To the average person, it might seem obvious that nothing can happen in nothing. But to a quantum physicist, nothing is, in fact, something," unquote. Other storytellers will tell you that frogs can become princes by just adding a few 100 million years of evolution. In 1999, you could have gone to the National Geographic Museum in Washington, D.C., and seen the fossil of Archaeoraptor on display, and read the tale of how it was a missing link between dinosaurs and birds. But as it turns out, the fossil was a fraud put together by a lowly Chinese farmer. And we were later led to believe that a lowly Chinese farmer was capable of fooling a team of experts from the prestigious National Geographic Society. In this day and age, with all the technology available to them, I think that is baloney. They knew they had a gullible public who would swallow anything. Apologists for the scientific community will tell you it was exposed by real scientists. Yeah. And where was that information found? On page 75 of some newspaper in a 1-inch column somewhere? In contrast to the front page headlines they got when they first announced the find? Or maybe in some technical peer-reviewed journal which the majority of the public who went to see the fossil would never read anyway. If you want to read about some more storytelling, you might pick up another one of those so-called science books, and you'll see a picture of something like this. This is allegedly a peppered moth that is resting on a tree trunk. But what they don't tell you in this textbook is that this peppered moth had to be killed and pasted to the tree so they can take a picture of it. Because peppered moths do not come out in the daytime. They are slow flyers and easy prey for birds, so they come out at night. And when they do rest, they do not rest on tree trunks. They rest up in the canopy of the trees underneath the branches. Now, the person who did the original study, Kittlewell, unfortunately, he released moths in the daytime, but these textbooks won't tell you that. The peppered moth is supposed to be proof of evolution. Or you might open up another so-called scientific textbook and find these fraudulent drawings of Ernst Haeckel. The late Stephen Jay Gould, who was an evolutionist, commented about these, and he said the following, and I quote, "We should not be surprised that Haeckel's drawings entered 19th century textbooks. But we do, I think, have the right to be both astonished and ashamed by the century of mindless recycling that has led to the persistence of these drawings in a large number, if not a majority, of modern textbooks," unquote. Or you might open up another textbook and find this series here, the alleged horse series. In fact, you might even find this series in a museum. At the time when Niles Eldridge was curator of the American Museum, he stated the following, and I quote, "I admit that an awful lot of that has gotten into the textbooks as though it were true. For instance, the most famous example still on exhibit downstairs is the exhibit on horse evolution, prepared perhaps 50 years ago, that has been presented as literal truth in textbook after textbook. Now, I think that this is lamentable, particularly because people who propose these kinds of stories themselves may be aware of the speculative nature of some of the stuff. But by the time it filters down to the textbooks, we've got science as truth, and we've got a problem," unquote. More storytelling can be found in delusional articles like the one put out by Richard Dawkins called "Where'd You Get Those Peepers?", where Dawkins praises a computer simulation model that never existed. Dawkins knows that many people are impressed with computer simulations, so he fabricated this story about Nielsen and Pelger's computer simulation model to bolster his claims about eye evolution. Although most people don't realize that computer simulations only reflect the bias of the computer programmer and do not reflect independent thought. And speaking of eye evolution, you might want to go check out this storyteller's video called "Dawkins Makes an Eye." There, Dawkins actually wants you to believe that an evolving eye can send vision information to the brain without the presence of an optic nerve. Nowhere in his video will you see him mention it or even discuss its development. Or maybe you might want to consider atheist Francis Crick's suggestion that life on Earth might have been the result of aliens planting seeds here on Earth. Now, that's not exactly Harry Potter kind of stuff, but hey, that's pretty close to Star Trek. In contrast, you can read the Bible, which proclaimed the world was round and suspended in space and that it revolved. And the Bible also described the hydrological cycle. And those are just a few of the things that were revealed by the Bible long before secular scientists discovered those truths. It is little wonder that scientists like Francis Collins are not atheists. And I would recommend a book by Collins entitled The Language of God. It's great reading. Nobel Prize-winning neurobiologist Sir John Eccles wrote the following, and I quote, "Each of us is a unique, conscious being, a divine creation. It is the religious view. It is the only view consistent with all the evidence," unquote. Maybe Thunderfoot should do a little research and find out why people like these believe what they do instead of the stories like the ones people like Dawkins tell, the ones that the late Stephen Jay Gould called just so stories. In closing, I would think by now any person with critical thinking skills would be wondering, why do evolutionists have to engage in such intellectual dishonesty with their presentations of deception if they had the overwhelming evidence for their case as they claim they do? Well, the fact of the matter is they don't have the overwhelming evidence. If they did, there wouldn't be two separate schools of thought, those being the gradualists like Dawkins and punctuated equilibrium proponents like Gould and Eldridge. It would surprise many to know that after 150 years of study by evolutionists, science cannot even tell us how the living cell evolved. That was pointed out by evolutionist Kenneth Miller in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial. They can't tell us how the living cell evolved, but claim to know how more complex structures and systems did. That's like me telling you I can't tell you how to build a bicycle, but I can tell you how to build a fully functional 747. I have no doubt the storytelling by evolutionists will continue with more frauds and more deception, and sadly enough, we have too many gullible people who will continue to swallow it hook, line, and sinker. Okay, thanks to all who listened to this video, and I hope you all have a good year. And until the next time, Lord willing, there is a next time, God bless.